and welcome to the Telltale Cake, where we tell tales about cake and eat cake, and we try to ignore the corpses under the floorboards. I'm your host, Beth. With me is my dear friend, Caroline, Dark Mistress of Libraries, and showing us all what you can do with a BA in English. Hi, Caroline. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Beth. I really appreciate it.
What do you do with a BA in English?
Mostly you try to BS your way through situations like this one.
Excellent. We'll see how well you do. So, what are we reading and why are we reading it?
We are reading Good Omens, and why we're reading it is because when the world is actually going to shit, it helps to read about something that is an averted apocalypse.
I think I might just stop and cry now.
Oh dear, I wasn't trying to depress you.
It was such a fun book.
I'm so sorry.
But yes, apocalypse. Now, I know that, like me, you were raised in a very evangelical, fundamentalist Christian environment. How did that affect your reading about the apocalypse?
So I went to a Southern Baptist church school, and I was there during the kind of 90s, 2000s, during the peak time of Left Behind kind of nonsense. And so there was a great deal of emphasis on the rapture can come at any time. And while at one point we don't know when Christ will return, we have a very detailed expectation of all of the events that will happen after the rapture. And there was, I remember specifically one of our teachers detailing on a chalkboard all of the different horrible things that would happen to the poor people who were left behind.
What?
Oh, yes. And so for myself, I grew up in a church that did not actually think there would be a rapture, but did think there would be a tribulation. So I would sit in class and think to myself, well, it'll be really fun to actually be here during all of these things that are happening. So for me, part of it was reading about this stuff and thinking, but why aren't they going to Jerusalem? Aren't things supposed to happen in Jerusalem? And so that was a little bit, puzzling for me. But that was the main way in which I was like, well, this is interesting. There also, I noticed, were not any instances in which people were taken out of their cars or in which computers stopped working or planes had the pilots taken out all of a sudden like you had in Left Behind. So, but honestly, I didn't miss it.
No, I was Church of Christ, which is largely amillennials, so they don't really have an opinion. I definitely worried about Jesus coming back and destroying the world. But there wasn't this detailed, all these horrible things are going to happen.
Yes, we would have things. So, for example, during a field trip, we were going on a bus, and they decided to show us one of the tribulation movies. I think it was called Tribulation, actually. And there was a guillotine involved. Someone's head was chopped off. We were in middle school, yes.
Then maybe it's time to re-examine your faith, preacher. I'm not looking for God. Put your hands on your head.
The tribulation has begun.
I'll finish them myself.
A deceiver rules,
I will show you the path. Just lead the power.
and faith must stand alone.
He's standing at the Father's right hand.
I always felt like the kinds of things that we watched, it was like you couldn't watch things that had certain curse words, but someone's head getting chopped off? Yes.
And here, I wouldn't even watch The Passion of the Christ because I thought it would be too torture porny.
It was. They took us to see it at the theater in class.
How did that
as a part of school.
How did that compare to the people's heads getting chopped off?
Oh, it was so much worse because head chopped off, it's quick, it's kind of done. And I remember, in fact, thinking about the whole guillotine thing and thinking to myself, well, that's not nearly as bad as some of the things in Fox Book of Martyrs because, of course, that's a normal thing for you to read when you're a child. So I thought, all things considered, really this whole guillotine thing is not so bad. Maybe we should be thanking the French. Maybe they've really given a good suggestion for how to handle things. Efficiency, and it's a good sharp blade, and it's done,
There are worse things.
There are worse ways to go. And so The Passion of the Christ was interesting. I was a extremely impressionable person. I have always been someone who cannot tolerate most horror movies, and I have to be very careful about what I actually see. And I have walked out of movies before that bothered me too much. Unfortunately, walking out of this one was not an option. So, in this particular case, I simply had nightmares for weeks and would constantly wonder if I was, how I was causing the literal torture of Christ.
On that note, to eat with this book, we decided to be very on the nose because we have two characters, one who is an angel and one who is a demon. So we made black and white cookies, which ended up, first of all, being kind of brown and white cookies.
Kind of brown and white. It will be very obvious to the listener, the watcher, that we are not pastry chefs.
We are not.
Also, because I have a gluten intolerance, we made these gluten-free, which has its own difficulties when it comes to baking. And as you can tell, neither one of us, especially me, I did the chocolate portion, is a fair hand at putting icing on cake. So, this is just the best we could do for the moment.
It's icing and it's on the cake. Also, I realize I said cookies. This is cake on a technicality. It is a cake base. It is a very cakey dough. It is just in very small cookie-sized cake arrangements. So let's see how this actually came out.
Also, I think it's also on the nose because a lot of times the Brits will make these really small cakes. And so I think for, the purposes of British, reviewing a British book, that this could count as cake.
I agree. It's not bad.
Mm-hmm. It's actually not bad. I'm pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I'm relieved. We did not sample these beforehand. We did not try making these until yesterday, so
yes,
they could have been bad and we would not have known.
No, until we were literally eating them on camera. So all things considered.
Yeah, this was also my first time ever baking with gluten-free flour.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if there was a difference. The dough was very thick and sticky, and it was very difficult to work with, but I don't know if that was just the dough or if that was the gluten-free flour. I just don't know much of anything.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with gluten-free flour a decent amount, and it is almost always more sticky. And you do have to add a little bit more liquid, which I was forgetting at first because it will thicken up a lot. Okay, and it doesn't have that gluten protein to really help it be stretchy. So it can be a bit more, harder to work with, just a bit more brittle and stiff. It's not as flexible.
Okay, that does explain it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah.
Still, these are pretty good.
These are pretty good. I think if I were doing it again, I think I would somehow make the icing a little bit less sweet, but that can be hard to accomplish. I think in retrospect, I would have used like some sour cream or something. That would make them not really black and white cookies, but I think it would improve the flavor.
I tend to agree because there's nothing in the icing really except for powdered sugar and what was it? Corn syrup?
Powdered sugar, corn syrup, a little bit of milk, just enough to dissolve. Now, I do think if you had put a little bit of salt in there, that might have cut the sweet just a tad.
Okay, good to know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so bad at making icing.
Yeah, I honestly, I've only made it about once in my life, and it was very obvious.
I can make buttercream okay. I tried to make a Swiss meringue icing once, and that was a little bit of a disaster.
Oh, that sounds challenging.
It was.
Yeah.
So many eggs.
Oh, goodness.
All right, so let's get into this. First of all, let's judge this book by its cover.
Yes.
So here we have a white book with a black and white portrait of a demon on it. And I kind of like it. Demon's got a glass of wine, looks pretty chill. There's another version of this book that is black and that has a white angel on the cover. Mm-hmm. And I honestly think I would like it better if both angel and demon were on the same cover.
Yeah, because you need both of them. That's kind of the point. I
agree. And I'm not mad at it. This cover art was done by Douglas Smith, who does this style of art called scratchboard, which I don't honestly know what that is.
I don't either.
Cool. I'll put some links up in the show notes. He's also done a bunch of covers for the Horatio Hornblower books.
Oh, yeah. I've enjoyed those. Those were very fun.
I do like Horatio Hornblower. I like stories about men in the really big hats on
Yes.
ships that go pew pew.
Yes, that's very fun.
It is
very
a
fun.
lot of fun.
You don't think about the background stuff so much, and it's more fun.
Exactly. We're not going to think about anything the British Empire did.
No. Just keep it very, very shallow, and then you'll have a great time.
And it's wonderful.
Yes. My book was, which I did not bring, was unfortunately published after the TV show.
Oh.
So it has that horrendous sticker on it, now a popular TV show, which just
hate
makes
that.
my heart hurt, It's just painful, but it was what I had. So, sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
No judgment.
Yeah.
All right, now you have a BA in English. So
I do.
one thing that I know you absolutely love is starting out any discussion or essay with reading a dictionary definition.
It's my favorite, obviously.
Obviously.
I did it with all my professors, and they loved it too.
Can only assume they did. So I brought along The Devil's Dictionary by Ambrose Bierce, and we're going to figure out what good omens are based on his definitions. So, good, adjective, sensible, madam, to the worth of this present writer, alive, sir, to the advantages of letting him alone. And then we have omens, or rather omen, noun, a sign that something will happen if nothing happens.
Wait. A sign that something will happen if nothing happens.
Correct.
Would you care to unpack that for us?
No.
I'm wondering is a sign that something will happen if nothing happens. So in my own background, I'm wondering, is that the kind of thing where you had, I think in the Jehovah's Witnesses, there was supposedly a return of Christ that they were all waiting for, and unfortunately, they did the juvenile mistake of giving a date.
Oh, is that the Jehovah's Witnesses?
There are various groups that did that. There were a lot of groups in the early 1800s that thought Jesus was going to come back at any point because I guess the Industrial Revolution was happening and it was very disruptive. So I'm sure we can all identify with some of that. So, they thought the end was nigh. The Jehovah's Witnesses gave an actual date, which was really unfortunate.
Never do that.
Never do that. They did, however, have the cunning to then say, well, he returned, but it was a spiritual return.
Love it.
Love it. So, if our listeners are trying to, do a grift in which you're having a prophecy, number one, don't do a precise date. That's terrible. But
Never
if
do
you
a precise
have
date.
already done a precise date, make sure that it's immaterial.
Exactly.
Something that can neither be seen nor heard,
Nor disproved.
nor
That-
disproved.
That is key. Do not say anything that can be disproved.
And you know what? If people challenge you, ask them, can you prove that there are no little green men running around on the ceiling? And if they can't prove it, then therefore it must be true.
Exactly.
Foolproof logic.
Excellent. So just to place ourselves in time a little bit here, this was published in 1990. So there was a end of the world scare about the year 2000. Either all of the computers were going to crash, which would have actually happened if a bunch of people hadn't worked really hard,
Right.
or I'm not sure, something Jesus returning.
Yes. So I remember my family and whatnot were not concerned about it at all, but my school was, and various people that I knew were, making sure that they had lots of canned food and bottled water and toilet paper. They would have been very prepared for COVID in 2020, but unfortunately for them, it didn't really help them for Y2K. There's a delightful King of the Hill episode about Y2K in which they're at the Megalomart and little Bobby sees this guy going by and he's like, Dad, I saw this man and he had 12 cases of triple ply and it made me feel uneasy. And that is kind of how I felt watching people prepare for Y2K. But this was long before that. So my feeling, at least about the historical moment for this, is that it's in this nice little calm period. And maybe that's just from retrospect. But it's in this nice little period where, we no longer have the Cold War, but, Y2K hasn't happened, 9/11 hasn't happened, and at least if you're in Britain or America, things seem pretty nice and chill. At least that's the feeling that I get from reading this.
I can agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into it. So we have our main characters. We've got Crowley. He's a demon. And his BFF, Aziraphale, who is an angel. And they both are assigned to work on Earth. Crowley, convinced humanity to get some knowledge from a tree. Aziraphale was supposed to kick them out with a flaming sword, but he ends up giving the humans the flaming sword because they'll probably need it, Very helpful. And so ever since then, they've just been kind of hanging out on Earth. They've got happy little lives. They like eating at nice restaurants. They're just a really happy, possibly gay couple.
I was gonna say, Aziraphale in particular is coded gay. 100%.
Yes.
He is a very happy little gay man with his classical music and his very old collectible bookstore in London. And you know what? I feel the best for him. He seems to be having his best life.
Yes. Crowley doesn't seem to be quite as happy, but he still seems to be doing okay.
He still seems to be doing okay. I mean, to be fair, I wouldn't be completely happy if I had random demons coming onto the radio to give me news that I may or may not like. That would intrude on my happiness.
This is true, but also, I think Crowley kind of taught them how to do that, so...
That's right. So he really did shoot himself in the foot about that one.
Yeah. Sometimes you just can't do a very good job as a subordinate.
No. One thing I liked was how they talked about how each of them were responsible for different parts of modern life. So apparently Aziraphale was responsible for Edinburgh and Crowley was responsible for Glasgow. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about stereotypes about Scottish cities for that to mean anything. But
Same.
I would assume that if it were set in the U.S., that Crowley would have been responsible for Newark.
Accurate.
Yes. So you can kind of think of it in your head like that, probably. And if people are from Scotland and are offended, I apologize. But I liked that. And they also talk about how Crowley designed, I don't remember the name of it, but some of the traffic conditions around London. And that people would even say, maybe this was designed. And yes, it was in fact designed.
Yes.
That was interesting to me.
It was designed to also make an occult symbol and have bad power flowing through it.
Correct.
And just have bad traffic as well.
Correct. If anyone else is familiar with Atlanta, they will understand when I say that 285 was clearly an occult project.
Obviously. It couldn't be anything else.
No. There was some demon work behind that.
And well done. I hope that demon got a commendation.
He should have. Very, very excellent work.
Exactly. So... happy little lives get disrupted because it's time for the Antichrist to be born and usher in the end of times. So right away, things go slightly awry. And by awry, I mean we lose the Antichrist.
Yes. Classic baby mix-up.
Babies all kind of look the same.
They all kind of look the same. We need to just accept this. The only times when they don't look the same is when there is an ugly baby, and there are ugly babies. And apparently in this case, they were just your normal run-of-the-mill child.
Right. So anyway, the forces of darkness are bringing in the Antichrist to a small hospital, planning to swap it out for the baby of an American attaché. End up accidentally swapping him in for the baby of some couple from Tadfield, which is just a normal English town.
Yes.
No one actually realizes this for quite a while.
It takes an embarrassingly long time for them to figure things out. It takes an embarrassingly long time for the demon and the angel to figure out that their child in America is just a normal run-of-the-mill child. And they try their best to influence him, and it ends up kind of coming to naught.
Yes, so anyway, this child, the wrong Antichrist warlock, grows up being heavily indoctrinated by both forces of heaven and hell. In the meantime, we meet some other characters that we'll need to know. Anathema Device, she's a witch. She has a book. She's got The Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter, which is a book from the 17th century, which is the only accurate book of prophecy in existence.
Correct. Unfortunately, and this perhaps does pertain to the dictionary definition of omen, it's very difficult, if not impossible, for anyone to gain knowledge from her nice and accurate prophecies because they tend to be written in such a way that they're so specific that no one, unless they're right on top of it, can tell what's going to happen.
Also, Agnes, being a 17th century witch, did not necessarily understand things in the 20th century, so she describes things like cars as best she can.
Yes. I will say this did remind me somewhat of how people would talk about the Book of Revelation and how that perhaps some of the scorpions and other things that were talked about might have been drones or other types of warfare. There was a little bit of that crossover as well.
Oh, that's fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never learned that much about Revelation in Sunday school.
Yeah, no, I will say it did make for some exciting lessons because it's an exciting book.
It certainly seems more interesting than a lot of others.
Yes, it is. So in this particular case, you also have a gentleman named Newt. And I really felt an affinity for this particular character because he loves something so much, but he's so bad at it. He wants so badly to be good at technology and to be good at doing all these little electrical experiments, and he just struggles, and he tends to blow things up instead. And when I really love this character is when he's at the computer lab and he manages to just short out the whole thing by just pressing a button. And I've had a very similar experience, so I felt a lot of kindred spirit for this particular person.
Newt is very sympathetic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, guess who isn't sympathetic? Newt's boss.
Newt's boss is not sympathetic, no.
Newt's boss is, in fact, the representative of toxic masculinity here. He is the head of the Witchfinder Army, and his advertisement in the paper is literally, be a man.
Yes. Although his type of toxic masculinity, I feel like, is meant to be kind of a throwback to what it would have been in the 1800s. He's very much got that kind of Calvinist vibe going on. He's very much like hasn't fully realized that he's actually in the 20th century and that, he's living in a time in which there are actually electronics and in which there aren't witches just running around everywhere. And he seems to have just not come across that information. It's a little tragic.
Yeah, but we are going to have to take a sidebar here to talk about nipples.
Nipples?
Yes. So one of Shadfield, as the head of the Witchfinder Army's main deal is he wants to count the number of nipples on a body, generally specifically female bodies. And I was looking this up, and I will add my sources in the notes. So supernumerary nipples on men were generally seen as a sign of extra virility up until the 1800s.
Interesting.
Meanwhile, supernumerary nipples on women means you're a witch.
Sure.
Obviously. So this is obviously a patriarchal double standard and not something I expected to be mad about today.
You never expect the patriarchy when it just comes shooting down. So wait, how did it change for men? You said it was that way until the 18th century. So what changed?
I think people just decided it didn't mean anything.
Oh, okay. All right.
People started to do actual doctoring and actual, grave robbing.
Right, sure.
And understand a little bit more about how the human body just normally looks.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see how that would put a damper on things. Yes.
Yeah, bodies just get much more less mysterious when you're digging them out of graves and dissecting them and going, oh, yeah.
Ironically, because you would think that the whole grave robbing thing would be exciting and, have a sense of mystery about it.
I think most of the medical students weren't doing their own grave robbing. They were contracting that out.
That makes sense.
You can't expect medical students to dig up their own graves.
I don't see why not. It seems like they're students. They're the lower end of the totem pole. They should be doing their own digging.
I completely agree. But I'm not in charge of the medical students.
Well, that's more the pity. So then we actually have the character who is the real Antichrist. Now, the real Antichrist is someone who is not necessarily what you would characterize as evil. How would you describe Adam?
He's kind of your stereotypical boy.
Yes, that sounds about right.
So he's this 11-year-old boy, and he hangs out with his friends, and they discuss things, and they get into trouble, and they generally terrorize the inhabitants of Tadfield in the way that small children who are being annoying do. And I say terrorize, there's nothing really bad. They're just children being boisterous, annoying children.
Right. Yeah, they're described as them.
Yes, them.
Yes. I actually had some feelings about them, and I don't know if you want to tackle that now.
Please tell me about them.
So my feelings were particularly about Pepper. Now, Pepper is the one girl in them.
Yes.
And as the one girl in them, she symbolizes that type of I'm not like other girls type of girl.
Yes, and I hate that.
Yeah, it was kind of uncomfortable. And I grew up very much thinking I was not like the other girls. And there are so many literary examples of not like other girls that I was supported in this and felt like it was my birthright to not be like other girls. So it's annoying now as an adult to come across it again and be like, and here's another example. She's got this nice little name like Pepper that's meant to be sort of non-feminine, and she's definitely not girly, and she gets very upset when you call her a girl, and she punches you in the nose and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, she's definitely not like other girls.
Yes, not like other girls. There is one boy who is extremely precise about everything, and he provides a nice little foil for kind of the rest of the group, which are more on the boisterous end of things. But it does represent this kind of wholesome childhood that I think a lot of people imagine took place more than it actually did, and that a lot of people probably imagine doesn't take place anymore. And they sort of bring that up in the book. They say, you know, Tadfield is the sort of place where it feels like time stopped and that children are still able to have these outdoor childhoods that aren't just wrapped up in television. I don't know. Did you get that feel from it?
I very much got that feel. It felt like the idealized 1950s childhood.
Yeah, so that was interesting. I will say, so the one thing about Adam is that he is very much already a leader. And so he's definitely the leader of them. And he's definitely someone who they listen to and they stop talking when he starts talking. And that's really the only difference, or the way that he is obviously different, so to speak, before all the action starts happening.
Right. One more set of characters we need to quickly meet before the action starts happening, and that is the four horse people of the apocalypse.
Yes.
So we have Famine, who is my favorite because he runs fancy restaurants where people don't actually get to eat much of anything.
It was delightful.
I love that. Pestilence has been replaced by Pollution, which I feel like is maybe not the best call given the pandemic, but whatever.
I had some thoughts about that as well, because so this was done in 1990, and the AIDS epidemic is really on the just tearing through at this point. And it's not still in the early 80s. People know what it is. So it seemed really odd choice to me for, you know, pestilence to not be a thing.
Ooh, yeah, that... Especially because Aziraphale is coded so gay.
He is coded so gay, yes. So that was a little off-putting. That's probably the sort of thing people wouldn't have thought about when it was published. But
Thank you for bringing it up, because I didn't think of it either.
Yeah, that was very loud and clear to me. So.
All right, so we have our slightly questionable Pestilence Pollution. War is a war correspondent. She's a beautiful woman who goes around, and wars just start wherever she is.
Yes.
And then we have Death, who is just sort of everywhere. Now, both Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman have a character of Death. But they seem to have gone with Terry Pratchett's version.
Yes. I do love the Terry Pratchett version of Death. If you're familiar with any of his Discworld novels, you'll be very familiar with Death, who speaks in all caps and really is not an evil character at all. Death is kind of maybe a true neutral, would you say?
Yeah.
I would say he's a true neutral, and he just guides people to the next thing.
Yeah, he's very nice, too.
Yeah. He's very polite.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Death, actually,
Yes.
as a character.
Yeah, no, as a character, Death is fantastic. One of my favorite Terry Pratchett characters. So I was glad to see at least a bit of that in this as well.
Yes. Okay, so I think we have everyone. Shadfield, Newt, Anathema Device, them, Crawley, Xerophil.
We have forgotten about the chattering nuns.
Yes, we had forgotten about the chattering nuns. So the hospital/convent that was having the parents for the swapped out child is run by an order of nuns known as the chattering nuns. And they are Satanists and they have to just talk all the time.
They cannot stop talking. We get to meet one, Mary Loquacious.
Yes, who is wonderful.
Who is wonderful. She's one of my absolute top 5 favorite characters in the book. She is someone who she was born to Satanism, like most of them. And so she didn't really give it much thought. It's just what you're brought up doing. And so, you go to the rituals and you do the thing. And then she joins the order. And because she was loquacious, she is able to talk quite without stopping. Mm-hmm. And you get an example of this when they're doing the baby swap. And she very much lives up to her name. But she does have some character development that we can go into later. But yes, so the Order of Chattering Nuns, they're the ones who are supposed to be facilitating the baby swap.
Yes. And of course, they are the ones under whom it all goes wrong. But nobody knows that for a while, after which it's kind of dissolved and supposedly the convent it's turned into something else and all the records are burned down.
Yes.
But this will be important later. In fact, in a few minutes. So it is time for the Antichrist to turn 11, at which point he's going to get some powers. And to symbolize this, the powers of darkness release the Hellhound.
Yes. This was very exciting. So I am someone who loves dogs, so I was very excited about the Hellhound. The Hellhound comes and is on its way to meet his master. And Adam is talking about what he would want in a dog, because like most children, he very much wants a dog, and his parents don't want him to have a dog. And so he's telling them what his perfect dog would be like. And as he speaks, because his voice has the powers and has gained the power now to change reality, the Hellhound begins to change from an actual Hellhound who would strike fear into anyone's heart into more of the type of dog that Adam has in mind.
And what I love is that the Hellhound also goes on an internal journey, and that goes throughout the rest of the book, where he goes from this like horrifying Hellhound that chases down lost souls to an earth dog that loves to chase rabbits.
Yes, and he becomes much smaller, he becomes friendly, and of course obedient. He would have been obedient to the Antichrist in any respect, but he would not have been a friendly little lap dog that he becomes.
And he has one floppy ear.
He does have one floppy ear.
This is important.
Yes.
And his name is Dog.
Yes. Perhaps Adam was not as creative as he could have been.
It's okay. He has Dog. So this is actually the point at which Crawley and Aziraphale realize they have the wrong Antichrist, because they are hanging around the alleged Antichrist birthday party. Aziraphale is trying to do magic tricks to entertain the children, which is just painful.
It is tragic to read. He has not realized that children developed past the Victorian era. And he tries doing the little rabbit in the hat tricks, not very well. They see through it. They mock him. He gets his feelings hurt. It's embarrassing.
Just so sad.
Yes, it's kind of cringe. So they're watching and waiting for the Hellhound, and the Hellhound never shows up.
So they contact, the Hellhound handlers, who say, "What are you talking about? We released the Hellhound on schedule. It's found the Antichrist." And oh dear.
Yes.
So they get frantic and start trying to locate the Antichrist. So first of all, they go back to where the Chattering Nuns used to have their convent, which Sister Mary Loquacious is now running. as a school for corporate types to play paintball and otherwise discover their true selves as corporate types do on retreat.
Right. So she discovered, she kind of goes on this self-fulfilling journey of realizing herself and realizing her talents. And she discovers that she is, for one thing, very good at computers. And she also discovers that she is very good at running a business and that she can get these business types to do kind of any ridiculous activity and they'll just roll with it.
It's true.
It is true. It meets my experience of corporate world and what they will consider as important. So when they come to the facility, they are in the middle of doing a paintball tournament and trying to shoot each other down to encourage competitive spirit or something.
Some buzzword, I'm sure.
Yes.
Crawley just on the way turns everyone's paint guns into real guns, but makes it so that no one will actually die just to cause maximum chaos.
Yes.
So we get a brief side journey into the world of some guy from marketing who's discovering his true bloodlust.
Yes, they become manly men all of a sudden. And they decided that having real guns was actually even better. So thankfully, Mary Loquacious's business did not suffer due to this change. In fact, it kind of went through a bit of a boom.
Yeah. So it all works out. I love Mary Loquacious.
I love her too. And you know what? I'm so happy for her.
Yeah, she's really taking off. She's like an entrepreneur. She's
Yes.
making it.
She
Good for
is
her.
making it. So they unfortunately realized that the records are gone.
Yes.
And that the location will not be helpful for them. And they go on this little discovery of trying to find where to go next. And along the way, they run into the descendant of Miss Agnes Nutter.
Yes, Anathema Device, re-entering the story with her book, is riding along on her bike. Crawley kind of runs into her.
Yes.
Her bike is not really fixable, so they give her a ride home.
Actually, the angel does decide to fix her bike and even gives it a few more little spiffy notes because he feels so bad.
Oh, right. Yes. Anyway, they give her a ride home. Unfortunately, she accidentally leaves the book in the back of their car, which turns out to be fortunate for Aziraphale because, first of all, he collects books of prophecy for his cute little bookshop.
Yes. He realizes what he has, and he basically goes into just extraordinary glee and, puts the closed sign on the door, hides himself back in his office, and is just entranced.
Crawley, meanwhile, goes back to his apartment to dread his superior's displeasure, threatens his houseplants because that's how he gets them to grow well.
You know what? I have done the same thing with my computer when it won't start correctly. And, I think if you put the fear of God into inanimate objects, they will do what you want them to.
I should try this because all my houseplants die.
Yeah. Try doing it. Yeah.
All right, I'll try threatening my houseplants and report back.
Yeah.
Have you tried threatening your houseplants, dear readers? Let us know.
Let us know in the comments below.
Exactly. All right, so Anathema can't find her book, but she does find them.
Yes.
Specifically Adam, and she gives him reading material.
She gives him some interesting reading material, and I'm sure that she means no harm. Let's put it this way.
However, what she's giving the Antichrist to read are a bunch of publications that are various conspiracy theories, things about aliens, things about the horrors of nuclear power, things about how the rainforests are suffering.
Yes. And it's enough truth mixed in with, talk of UFOs and aliens that he gets his mind a bit scrambled.
And he's the Antichrist, but he's an 11-year-old boy.
Right.
So he does have sort of an 11-year-old boy's understanding of the world.
Yes.
Which is sometimes a bit too literal.
Yes, so he takes all of this very literally and
Very seriously.
Very seriously. And because he's the Antichrist, when he says, I want the rainforest to grow and I want nuclear power to stop, these things actually start happening.
Yes. Also, UFOs appear.
UFOs do appear. I don't think there was anything really that happened with the UFOs. They just sort of appeared.
Yeah, people came, like little green men came out of them and wished people generally well and then left. It was fine.
Yeah, it was very chill.
Yeah, it's how you would sort of expect an 11-year-old boy to envision aliens.
Exactly. It wasn't Independence Day or anything like that.
Exactly. Then maybe if the Antichrist had watched Independence Day, we would be in a very different situation now.
Yeah, I think if this had happened around the year 2000, it would have gotten a lot darker.
Yes. But fortunately, we're still in this nice sort of chill period and sort of chill area of the world. Now, what does happen is that people who track odd phenomena start noticing.
Yes.
Specifically, Newt. Now, if you remember when we were talking about this 20 minutes ago, Newt is a member of the Witchfinder Army, along with Shadfield, and Newt's job is to go through the newspaper, which he spends 3 hours doing every morning, to try to find odd phenomena. He finds a bunch. Shadfield is mostly interested in odd numbers of nipples.
He's not finding that, but he is finding a lot of portents.
And what he's really finding is odd is that Lower Tadfield is this weird place where the weather is always perfect and expected.
Right, which, if you've ever been to England, is unusual for England. There should be a lot more rain in Lower Tadfield than there actually is.
So he decides to go check it out. He gets permission from Shadfield to go off on his merry way to Lower Tadfield in his car, Dick Turpin, which I feel like is a joke that I'm missing.
Yes, probably.
But, so there you are. He is going off to Lower Tadfield. And he encounters some little green men. It's very strange and frightening. He also discovers some Tibetans who are digging through tunnels from Shangri-La. It's a whole thing.
Yes. That part was a little bit confusing, but I think it was just one of those things where it was another thing that Adam read about, and therefore here we are.
Meanwhile, Shadfield gets concerned about what might be happening to Newt.
Yes.
And he decides to go after Newt, which is a problem because Shadfield has no money. He is on the payroll of both heaven and hell, but he still doesn't have a lot of money.
Frankly, that kind of makes sense. I can see both heaven and hell being cheap.
Exactly. So, which is kind of sad that even the divine armies can't do real labor rights.
It's kind of to be expected, though. I feel like if man is made in God's image, and then you extrapolate from there, you can see how that would work.
God is not for unions.
No, not for unions. They're very, very union busting. And you get the impression when they talk about the demons that this is very much a top-down organization and they don't really brook disagreement.
Anyway, Shadfield goes to Aziraphale's bookstore apartment to ask for more money.
Yes.
He ends up breaking in because Aziraphale is not opening the door. Aziraphale, meanwhile, has decoded the nice and accurate prophecies of Agnes Nutter, witch, and has called into heaven to report that he knows the location of the Antichrist. And also, there's the Antichrist. We're heaven. Shouldn't we stop it?
Right. We're the good guys. We need to do the good thing.
Turns out this is not part of heaven's ineffable plan.
No. There's a lot of talk about ineffability in the book. And it's sort of this understanding of, God's ways are higher than our ways. Growing up as a Calvinist, you would hear a lot about this because, we don't know why God chose some people and not others, but it's ineffable, as Aziraphale might say. Now, one of the things that they say is that they need to have the actual Armageddon happen. They want the war to actually take place so that they can actually defeat Satan and his armies. Even though it will cause all of this suffering, it still needs to take place in heaven's point of view.
Yes. Bierce does not define ineffable for us.
Oh, that's very sad.
I know, right? Anyway, Shadfield breaks in. Aziraphale is talking to his superiors. This makes Shadfield very excited. He's seeing actual supernatural phenomena. He's a witch finder. He's going to go smite this witchy activity.
Yes. It makes him feel as if he is back at once in the 17th century, able to actually take down the witches that are occurring and able to be a force for good.
Aziraphale warns him not to step into the glowing blue circle with which he is talking to his superiors. Shadfield does not listen. Ends
Sad.
up kind of shoving Aziraphale into the circle, which causes Aziraphale's body to disincorporate.
Yes.
This is very upsetting to Aziraphale, and he starts jumping around looking for new bodies to inhabit.
Now, the body that he ends up inhabiting, how would you... She is an interesting character.
Madame Tracy. So she is a woman who is what we might call of a certain age, or getting up there.
That's a good way to put it.
She has 2 side jobs she works. She draws aside the veil as a medium spiritualist kind of person earlier in the day. And then later in the day, she does some sort of sex work.
You get the impression that she is just very straightforward and blasé about the whole thing. She's extremely practical, and she's very good at customer service, and she knows what her customers want when they come in for both items. She's very good at empathetically reading her customers who are just looking for a little hint of something from the beyond from their loved ones, and she's very good at giving that to them and giving them that comfort that they're looking for.
Yes. Anyway, she actually seems to have kind of a thing for Shadfield, even though he refers to her as a Jezebel.
Yes. He's very dismissive of her, and she clearly has the hots for him.
Which is just... It annoys me. Shadfield just seems like one of those men that you don't need to bother with. Like, he's not... Madame Tracy is not a rehabilitation project for badly raised men.
Right. No. Madame Tracy, wherever you are, you can do better.
Yes, you can do way better. You can get a man who does not want to know how many nipples you have and is not going to expect you to cook for him and is not going to refer to you as a Jezebel.
Yes. You need a man who actually respects you for what you do and who you are.
And it's fine to cook for him if you want, but he's never going to cook for you or say thank you.
Exactly.
And that's the problem.
Right.
So, yeah, you can still leave him. It's fine.
Right. So she's actually rather shocked when she's in the middle of doing her medium work, and she actually realizes there is a real presence and not just one that she's making up.
And yet somehow she's kind of okay with it.
Yeah, she kind of rolls with it.
Shadfield still wants to go to Lower Tadfield. He wants Madame Tracy to drive him, which is when he realizes that, there's 2 people. And then Crawley joins up with them somehow.
I know that with Crawley, his issue is that he has been stuck at his place, and he has to evade his own employers because they are extremely intent on making sure that Armageddon happens, and they're beginning to suspect that he may have some divided loyalties.
Yes, and he ends up fleeing through the telephone wires.
Yes.
And ends up trapping Haster inside an answering machine, which is...
Yes. He also does some kind of Home Alone style pranking of his apartment to make sure that there's a bucket of holy water just waiting to kill them off, as well as some other kind of pranks to make sure that the demons are not able to follow him.
Yes, and then he sets off in his Bentley, which is the thing he probably loves most on Earth.
Yes.
To find Aziraphale, and then he finds the burned out circle and the broken in bookshelf.
Yes, he panics.
Yes.
So he ends up going out towards Lower Tadfield, and on the way, they are just bombarded by literal raining cats and dogs, as well as some other portents.
We also have the 4 horse people who have all met up in a bar, done some trivia together like you do in a bar, and then they all get on their motorcycles and head off to Lower Tadfield. They just know where the Antichrist is because they're the 4 horse people.
Right. They actually have their shit together.
4 other bikers in the bar also head out after them because they want to become horse people as well, or as they put it, real Hell's Angels.
Yes. They're pretty much just put up with by the Four Horse people because obviously they don't really have what it takes, and they're not actually the horse people of the apocalypse. They just really want to feel important.
Yeah, and then in the drive up to Lower Tadfield, they end up all dying, which I don't know if you've ever seen any of the Deadpool movies.
I never got around to it.
There's this one scene in, I think, the second one where Deadpool's assembling a team to go infiltrate something, and every single member of the team dies one after another, and it just gets funny.
Yeah, it's funny in kind of a sad way.
Yes.
Yeah. It does remind me a bit of the prologue of one of Pratchett's books. I can't remember which one, where he dedicates the book to the sort of just heroic, ordinary soldiers who have to rush into danger. They're never given names, and they die. Mm-hmm. And how we don't appreciate their sacrifice. These characters feel like that.
Is that Monstrous Regiment?
It might be Monstrous Regiment, yeah.
I like that one.
That one's a good one.
Yes. Them are hanging out in Lower Tadfield, and Adam is in a bit of a mood. He is talking about how, the world is so bad because the whales are dying, the rainforests are dying. Maybe it should be better. And then he starts talking about if he were to destroy the world and start over, how would he make it?
Yes, and them begin to be a little bit terrified by this turn of events because obviously they realize no one should be destroying the world. Things are going a bit awry with our Adam here.
Yes, but they can't quite stop it. And there's this really frightening scene where they're trying to leave and he commands them to come back and they have to. And everyone, including Adam, gets a little bit freaked by
Yes,
that.
that's definitely the scariest part of the book to me. Because you can imagine that happening and that sense of like, I can't actually stop you from making me do something. If you too are in the are feeling as if the world is going to shit and you are not sure what to do, I would recommend buying yourself some gluten-free flour and making yourself some cookies. Because if the world is going to shit, you might as well have cookies to enjoy.
It's baked goods, not baked bads, for a reason.
There we go.
Continuing. So for some reason, there's an American military base in Lower Tadfield.
I mean, part of me doesn't understand why, but then again, Americans tend to have military bases all over the world, so why not? I was willing to suspend belief on that one.
Yeah, it doesn't really bother me that it's there. It's obviously there's a plot convenience, but at the same time, it's not a huge stretch.
Right.
Adam and them go there, and what's going to happen is Adam is thinking he's going to make all the nukes go off and destroy the world in a nuclear war and then remake it.
Right, correct. And it is Aziraphale and company's job to make sure that he is stopped before he can do this. And of course, they're up against the horse people of the apocalypse who want to make sure that it actually goes through.
Meanwhile, Crowley is also trying to get there as fast as he can. And so is Shadfield on the back of Madame Tracy's kind of motorbike thing.
Yes, that one's not going very well because obviously it's just a little motorbike. It can only go so fast.
Yeah, the other thing that is problematic is that the occult symbol that is the highways around London have come to life and they seem to be burning things up.
Yes, they're not happy about this.
Yeah, this is not really a problem for Crowley, however. He just keeps driving the Bentley even though it's on fire.
Well, the great thing about the Bentley is that it's so old that it's being purely powered supernaturally at this point.
Yes.
He has not had to get oil changed or anything like that in a very long time, and it can drive through anything.
Yes.
I would love to have a car like that.
It would be so gas efficient.
Oh, wonderful.
So everyone's headed for Lower Tadfield. Newt has already gotten there. He has met Anathema. They've hooked up, which was predicted in the Nice and Accurate Prophecies. That one was more clear to everyone.
Yes.
Various ancestors had written encouraging notes about that prophecy, which...
That one might have been a little embarrassing to read, but,
Yeah.
you don't really want your ancestors and your great aunts to talk about your sex life in a book.
Yeah, I like to think that my ancestors are happy that I'm having a good life and having sex, but I'd also don't want to ever talk to them about it.
No, no, and I'd rather not read their encouraging notes from beyond the grave.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some things you don't do seances to learn.
No, that's one of them,
Absolutely.
100%. But they do, and I mean, you know what? The best for them because they are two wonderful characters.
Yes. So anyway, they've had a nice night. They're going to head out to the American military base to try to stop the nuclear war.
Right.
And this is where Newt's specialty just comes in very handy.
Yes, because Newt, as you will remember, is incapable of touching electronics without them falling apart.
So he ends up actually foiling the Antichrist plan by touching one of the computers in the military base.
Yes. I feel that might be my role at some point in the future. If things need to happen and there needs to be good computer access in order for something evil to happen, just let me touch it and it'll be fine.
You are the hero that we need.
I'm the hero that we need. Newt was clearly the hero that they needed.
Yes. So, Antichrist's initial plan has been foiled, but all is not yet well. Because it turns out that the assembled forces of heaven and hell, they are both there, and they just really want to fight.
Yes. Because at the end of the day, that's kind of what they're about.
And so they're just waiting on the Antichrist to give the word.
Now, the Antichrist has this interesting soliloquy where he talks about the whole he kind of gets a little philosophical, and he talks about the whole point of everything. And to illustrate this, he talks about the nemesis of the them. And how there is another little gang at the school who they are always up against. And he talks about how if they were able to ever win against this other gang, they would in some way lose their sense of being, their purpose. They would not really have as much fun because they wouldn't have that wonderful nemesis to go against.
Exactly. There's a word for this, the idea that there have to be two sides, good and evil. It's a theology thing.
There's a Manichaeism, I think.
Yes, I was about to go with it starts with an M.
Yeah, I think that's the heresy, yes.
Manichaean?
Manichaean,
I mean,
yeah.
is that how you pronounce it?
I don't know. We're going to go with it.
Okay, so Adam does a Manichaean heresy,
Yes.
which is awesome because it leads to the world getting saved. So
Sometimes you got to use your heresies for good.
exactly. What's your favorite heresy?
I'm trying to think. My favorite heresy probably, Manichaean is not my favorite, actually. I'm not a huge fan of that one. So there is, I believe there's a heresy that Jesus was raised just as a spirit and not physically. And, that could be a decent one because sometimes you think about like being raised from the dead but actually having a body still, and that can be kind of unruly.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think about the idea of having a body and actually having to deal with the fact of having a body. And even if it's a heavenly body, do you really want to deal with it? I don't think so. It's kind of a bummer. So that would probably be my favorite heresy. Not one I believe, but, you got to have a favorite.
I think I'm into Gnostic heresies.
Okay, sure. That's a classic. It's a classic for a reason.
Exactly. Sometimes you just got to go with the tried and true.
Yeah. So they go with Manichaean. And I will say, this was one of those things where it feels very much a product of its time. Because I think that if you are sitting here today in the year of our Lord, 2020, you might... 2022, oh my goodness, gosh. It feels like it's just been all one long year since 2020, but you're right, it is 2022. If you're sitting here in the year of our Lord 2022, you might feel as if you don't really want good and evil to be equal but opposite reactions. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like I'm tired of evil.
Yeah, right?
Let's have some good winning. At least for a
you don't
minute.
really want the evil to be getting any scores. The other way in which I felt like it was kind of a product of its time, and you mentioned this to me before when we talked about this, was that you get this sense in which people are generally kind of good and well-meaning and just sort of bumbling around. You get that sense in the book for the most part, that most people are just sort of doing the best they can, and they're kind of stupid and they're kind of bumbling, but, they do the best they can and they're not fundamentally evil. And that's one of those things that can sometimes be hard to actually believe nowadays.
Yes.
So I do think that there are some interesting ways in which when you read this book, you think, wow, this was definitely published in 1990.
Yes. We had some better expectations of the world, maybe.
Yes, there was some optimism, I think. It was probably easier for the likes of Gaiman and Pratchett, being white men, to have that kind of optimism, to be fair.
Absolutely. And speaking of optimism, there's a little bit of a pessimistic moment about how corporate bureaucracies are just going to corporate bureaucracy, because even after, them defeat the horse people with some symbolism, and Adam has said he doesn't want the world to change, Beelzebub and Metatron, the voice of God, are still wanting to go at it and fight.
Oh, yeah, they still want to do the thing, for sure.
Yes. And then Aziraphale and Crawley just convince them that they need to go back and await further instructions from the higher bosses.
Right. Yeah, they do this thing where they just use bureaucracy to defeat bureaucracy.
Yes.
So there was a guy, and unfortunately I can't think of his name, but there was a guy in Nazi Germany who was a Swedish diplomat, and he would basically use his job as a way to go up to Nazis who had trains full of Jews and say, well, my superiors say that these people have to come with me, and he would just act in a very authoritative way. And because the Nazis were primarily just bureaucrats, they just had to go along with it. And so that did ring true to me, that
Yes.
it was kind of very much a, well, my superiors say that we need more time. So, who are you to argue with my superiors?
If you can name drop the right people, you can get very far in a bureaucracy.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't quite agree that the actual voice of God would be able to be swayed by that, but maybe there's always a higher power, I guess. So,
yeah. Well, whatever, however that works. Satan himself also tries showing up, but Adam banishes him.
Yeah, it did pretty easily, actually. That the way that he banishes Satan is that it's he hears that his father is coming, and so in his mind he thinks, well, what I actually want is for my adoptive father to come. And so reality changes so that it's actually his very ordinary British adoptive father that comes instead of Satan.
Yes.
So the world is saved.
So yeah, everything returns to normal. The them go on as normal, except Adam is grounded for a bit.
Adam is able to get out of being grounded because he does have his little powers. And so he does use them for fun. Like they end up going to the circus or something.
I mean, you can't really ground the Antichrist.
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to ground the Antichrist?
Yeah. Shadfield, Tracy proposes to Shadfield once Aziraphale leaves her. He accepts after wanting to know how many nipples she has, which again, Madam Tracy, you can do better.
Yeah, Madam Tracy, we are here for you. We will listen to you, and we will help you find someone better.
We will take you out to dinner to celebrate your divorce.
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes you need to celebrate a divorce. And Tracy, we are here for you, and we will help you understand that there is a life past divorce.
Absolutely. Other than that, Crawley and Aziraphale go home, presumably to continue living their happy little Earth lives.
Yeah, I mean they definitely have a good thing worked out for themselves, and they're just able to continue. Aziraphale has his bookstore, Crowley is still able to listen to Queen whenever he wants or doesn't want, as the case may be, and they're able to continue their happy little life.
It's a very nice ending. It
is a nice ending. The book is really great if you appreciate British sense of humor and if you enjoy reading about kind of fantasy, but that's where fantasy actually impedes on Earth. Yes. It reminded me in some ways, there's a delightful book called Mistress Masham's Repose, and it was written in like the 40s or 50s, I think, I guess the 50s, by T.H. White. And it's this delightful little book in which the Lilliputians from Gulliver's Travels end up on Earth, and they are in Britain and living their nice little life. And so and then Mistress Masham she is just this little girl who finds them. And so you get this.
Cute.
It's adorable. It's a darling little book, and a lot of people don't know about it. I'd highly recommend it. But it's this nice little mix of the magical intruding on the very ordinary, and you get that with this book. So if that's something you like, I would highly recommend it.
So now it's time to rate this on my sugar scale. So S is for sexiness. We do have a sex scene. It's kind of off camera, but Newt and Anathema do have a lovely night together.
They do have a lovely night together. I would say Crowley is written to be sexy.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say? Like, he's definitely coded sexy.
Yeah, it's kind of restrained, but I would say at least one bodice is getting ripped here.
Yes. So, I mean, it's moderately sexy.
Yes. There's not no sexy, but it's also not, like, super sexy.
Yeah, no, it's moderate.
Yeah, one bodice ripped.
Yeah.
Uniqueness. So when I was initially thinking about it, I didn't think it was that unique because of the Left Behind series. And also it reminded me a lot of that one season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where some of the vampires are trying to bring on the end of the world and some of the other vampires are like, we like it here because humans are walking around like so many Happy Meals on legs.
Right. Spike is very much opposed to this idea of ending the world.
I love Spike.
Spike's great.
But then I looked at dates, and this was published in 1990, and the Left Behind novels were 95.
Yes.
And Buffy did not start airing until 97.
Right.
So it predates all of that. And also, we have this idea where religion is just, it makes for a fun read. And religion is not something that we have fun with a lot. It's
right. Yeah, and I think that what they're doing is really, it's kind of like a midrash where you're taking kind of like doing a fanfic about scripture, and they just kind of run away with it from there. If you like that kind of thing, The Red Tent is more directly a midrash, and it's very much a feminist reading of the story of Rachel and Leah and Jacob and their children, and it's fantastic. Highly recommend.
Okay, gender. Speaking of feminism. I think this passes the Bechdel test.
Yes, I think it does. Like I said, there's a good amount of the whole, not like other girls thing, which I've come to kind of expect in literature written before a certain time.
Yes. The other thing I wanted to mention, it's a fairly minor incident, but one of Madame Tracy's clients is a ridiculous woman that the authors just really want us to know is fat.
Yes, that's very important for us to know.
Yes. In fact, that is really the only thing we know about her, and it's relayed in a very nasty way, in my opinion.
Yeah, it kind of comes out of left field.
Yes, and I do blame Terry Pratchett for that because that's something he kind of does occasionally, at least in Discworld. He just sometimes really wants you to know that his female characters, and only his female characters, are fat.
Right.
And this isn't like Anna Karenina where she's fat and that's one of the things that's attractive about her.
Right. Or it's just a neutral thing about the character. It's a she's fat and that means she's ridiculous.
Yes. And we already talked about nipples. And yes, I do know that some witches that were persecuted were men, but about 80% odd of the witches that were found and persecuted were women. So the existence of the Witchfinder army is very misogynistic, even before they tell Newt to be a man.
Right. Although you get the impression that it's meant, like, we know it's meant to be misogynistic.
Yes.
Like, there's not this thinking of, oh, people should be witchfinders. So, I mean, within the context of the book, I didn't find that to be, like, anti-feminist or anything.
Oh, not at all. Just wanted to mention it. So Franz Kafka says that books should be an axe to break the frozen sea inside us. So how much do we think this book was an axe?
I think it's more like a pickaxe.
Okay. Like
I think it's more like, it gives you little pinpricks and it breaks apart any sadness you might feel because it is humorous and you can get joy from it. I don't think that it's an axe so much as that it makes you view the world in a particularly different way. At least it didn't do that for me.
Same.
So it's not some earth-shattering, worldview-changing kind of novel. But it does bring you joy. And I think that a book that brings you joy is good enough.
I agree. I am going to quibble with your definition of a pickaxe being just little pinpricks because Trotsky died from a pickaxe.
That's true. A pickaxe can be used with lethal intent. You're accurate.
So maybe a miniature, tiny little pickaxe, not a Trotsky killing pickaxe.
Right. Just to be clear. Yeah. So no, I would say it's not quite what Kafka had in mind.
I'd agree with that. Finally, we have the orange sugar for readability. It was really fast for me. There's so many fun little whimsical touches. Like, all car cassettes eventually turn into Queen.
Right. Correct. Yeah, she's right. There are so many fun touches to it. And you get this wonderful camaraderie and dialogue between Aziraphale and Crowley that's really fun to read. You get these nice little asides that they do, which Pratchett is really good about doing.
Yes.
Death is a lot of fun, and you really get to feel like you get to know even some of the minor characters. So I felt like it was a very quick read. My attention span is not what it was back in college, but even I could manage to just plow right through. So
I did like the little touches. Just the fact that the Hellhound has a character arc was wonderful.
And the attention to detail on that, that he has a floppy ear, things like that.
So thank you so much for joining me today, Caroline.
Thank you so much for having me. It was delightful.
Is there anything you would like to exhort our readers to do or look at or contribute to?
You know what? I would say look up Good Omens and look up some of the other Discworld books as well. They can be a little bit daunting to get into, but try to find one of the one-offs that isn't necessarily part of the series. So, Monstrous Regiment would be a great place to start if you want to dig into Discworld.
Love Monstrous Regiment. It's wonderful, very feminist.
Yes.
Pretty great.
It's pretty great. Very, very, very trans-affirming, I thought.
Yes, that as well. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any final words for our guests?
I think I'm supposed to tell you to like and subscribe, so do that.
Yeah, like and subscribe. Thank you.